by demonstrating ethics, and it's not just about staying out of trouble, it's also about proactively serving our communities in a way that they see continuous value.
I've described our ethics code as both a compass and a shield. It can help us sort of find the right path when we're unsure what to do, and it protects us.
Trust is the foundation of effective local government leadership, and it begins with ethics. Today's leaders are moving forward in an era of rapid change. Resident expectations are higher, technology is evolving more quickly than ever, polarization is impacting governance, and public confidence in institutions is fragile. And that's why ethical leadership matters more than ever. Now, March is National Ethics Awareness Month, so now is the perfect time to discuss ethics in 2026 and beyond. We know that effective local government leadership depends on trust, and today we'll cover how and why ethics is essential to building that community confidence. I'm Angelica Waddell with ICMA, and this is Innovate. I'm joined by two leaders to dive into the ethics of local government, the ICMA Code of Ethics, and provide practical insights to help you thrive in this challenging era. Both are board members serving on the ICMA Committee on Professional Conduct. Okay, so before we jump into this interview, let me tell you a little bit more about our guests. And hello, welcome to both of you.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks, Angelica. Great to be here.
So joining us today is Steve Bartha. This is Town Manager of Lexington, Massachusetts, appointed in November 2024. Steve previously served for 10 years as Town Manager of Danvers, Massachusetts. He's active in the profession nationally as an ICMA Northeast Regional Vice President and is a past president of both the Massachusetts and Connecticut Municipal Management Associations. A native of Northern Michigan, Steve earned his bachelor's degree in political theory and constitutional democracy from Michigan State University. He also spent 2 years teaching high school English from Baton Rouge through Teach for America before earning his master in public administration from the University of Connecticut and pursuing a career in local government. Well, we're so glad to have you today, Steve. Is there anything else you want people to know about you?
No, I'm hoping Michigan State does a little better this March than in past Marches. It's very frustrating to see the Wolverines as a 1 seed, but I have confidence in the scrappy Spartans.
They can do it, yes. And then this is Pam Davis. Pam is the Assistant City Manager for the City of Boulder, Colorado. Since 2020, Pam has helped lead several major service areas, including utilities, transportation and mobility, open space and mountain parks, and climate initiatives, along with the City Clerk's Office and City Council programs. She has held local government leadership roles in both Colorado and Arizona and is active nationally in the profession as Executive Board Vice President for ICMA's Mountain Plains region and the founder of Civic Pride. Pam holds a Bachelor of Arts in Government from Smith College and a Master of Public Administration from Arizona State University. Hello, Pam. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I always feel remiss if I don't mention that my number one job in life is to be a mom to my wonderful 6-year-old son, Russell. So everything I do is for him.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely.
Having met Russell, I can tell you he's a very cool kid. So
this is a good opportunity to show the next generation, what ethics in local government can look like. Why don't we go ahead and jump into these interview questions? All right, y'all, like I said before, this is National Ethics Awareness Month. But ethics is something that we want to make sure we're paying good attention to throughout the full year, not just in March. So, in your opinion, Steve, if you want to begin, why do you think that ethics is critical right now in 2026? And why does it matter for public trust?
Well, thank you for the question. And I think, you touched on this in the introduction. Trust in institutions at every level of government is fragile right now. And ethics really is built on trust. And democracy works best at the local level, and it works best when there is faith in the work we're doing. And that's where I think having a code of ethics like our profession does, it telegraphs to the world that, we are going to make decisions based on merit and fitness. We can be trusted to provide information, even when that information is difficult or inconvenient or not what people want to hear. Having an ethical code that keeps you moving in the right direction, keeps you consistent, keeps you serving all of your constituents fairly and equitably. And I think, particularly at a time when polarization is as high as it's ever been, this is stress testing our decisions every day. And as we're contending with, misinformation and residents who want real-time information and scrutiny is high, I think it helps us to sort of center and come back to, what our profession is all about, which is serving everybody fairly and compassionately.
Right. It brings us all back to the initial why. Why do we have this profession? Why do you choose to work in local government? Now, Pam, if you could answer the same question, why is this critical? Why now?
Thank you so much for the question. And I think Steve answered it really well. I agree with everything he said. I think for me, given the polarization that Steve alluded to, we as government employees need to continually justify why we exist, essentially. We need to continually demonstrate that there is value to having government structures to support our communities. And so if we're not operating at the highest standard of ethics, and if we're not regularly connected to the communities that we serve and understanding the struggles that they're having day to day, then we have no business sort of doing what we're doing. And so I think by demonstrating ethics, and it's not just about staying out of trouble, it's also about proactively serving our communities in a way that they see continuous value from the sacrifices that they make for the government to exist.
So that's such a good point because there are new challenges. There are different kinds of challenges. All right. So I want to know a little bit more about your own career path, your path to leadership. And also, I'd like to know about how a commitment to ethics has helped you in your personal career. Pam, if you could start.
Yeah, I would love to. And genuinely so, my career path was grounded in ethics for me at the very beginning. So I came to local government service initially through more of an advocacy lens on government. So I became very interested in government as a young person and pursued a political science degree at Smith College. And at that time, I was thinking much more in kind of a reformer mindset of I want to go serve government so that I can change it and make it better. When I reached my MPA program at Arizona State, that coursework and the relationships that I built early on in the career demonstrated to me that although it's important to carry your authentic self into your career and show up as you are into roles, it's also really important to know what you're representing in that work. And so what I learned early on in my career is that while I carry my own perspective, my own bias, my own interest into my career, what is most important is that I always center the people that I'm serving in everything that I do in local government. And so that's really how ethics showed up for me early on as I took those first city fellowships and then later started my career, was this idea that I can I'm capable of balancing both my own interests, but also first and foremost, prioritizing that which the elected leaders that I work for, the community that I support, and making sure that their needs are front and center. And so it's been a great leadership path ever since. I think as long as those things have stayed core to what I do, I've really enjoyed serving communities with a wide range of characteristics. I've worked in small communities experiencing decline. I've worked in medium-sized cities that are growing exponentially. And by centering ethics in that journey, you meet the needs of the community in front of you rather than projecting kind of your own experience onto every job that you have. So that's been really, really crucial to me. And then along the way of that career growth, I think what I've appreciated most about this career in local government is as long as you don't stray from those ethical underpinnings, you get to have a lot of fun in terms of how you serve community. It's important to maintain trust, it's important to prioritize safety. But outside of that, we have this tremendous opportunity to use public resources to innovate, to be creative, and to sort of create that platform for people to live their lives.
I love that because you're serving an entire community. You're serving everybody, and ethics is really going to help you do that. All right, Steve, how about for you?
Well, I love that answer, and I will second the idea that fun also needs to be centered in everything that we do, because our work can be very serious at times, and so fun is non-negotiable in the organizations where I've served. And I love that question because, we, especially on the board and just in our state associations, we meet and work with so many people who come to this work from so many different paths and so many different starting points. And so when I think about my journey and specific to ethics, I guess my ethical journey began as a Cub Scout way back when I was 6 years old, learning about trying to be a trustworthy, brave, friendly, courteous person. Um, and then in college, and fun fact, the ICMA ethics director, Jessica Collins, and I both attended the very same teeny tiny political theory program at Michigan State University. We didn't know each other at the time, but we have the same degree, and I think they graduate about 40 people a year with that degree. So it's a small world. But there, as a political philosophy student, learning about Plato and a virtue-based ethics system, and how in pursuit of the human's highest happiness, we need to try to cultivate things like wisdom and courage and justice. That was not explicit in my journey, but certainly it's in there somewhere rattling around. And I was drawn to this work through service. I did not know what I wanted to do as an undergraduate. I was in a pre-law. I didn't realize that I was in a pre-law program. I just liked reading and writing, and realized around the time everybody else was applying to law school, I needed a plan. So I applied to Teach for America, and ended up moving from Michigan to Southern Louisiana and teaching high school English for 2 years, with a great organization. TFA is dedicated to equity, service, and doing right by communities. And part of what attracted me to teaching was service. I had worked in college tutoring kids in East Lansing, and coached track and wrestling, and have always been sort of community oriented. And so I thought, based on those experiences, teaching might be my calling. Definitively was not. My wife spent a lot more time in education than I did. We met in Teach for America. But teaching is way harder than what I do today. I say that to anybody who will listen to me. When you're a teacher, you have 100 students, and you can't have a bad day because you have to be prepared for their bad days. And if I'm in a bad mood in my current job, I can close the door and grumble and let off steam. But you don't have that luxury as a teacher. So big shout out to the teachers. But we were in Louisiana the year our 2-year term down there was split by Hurricane Katrina, and that experience, volunteering after the hurricane and just watching the city of Baton Rouge try to, went from a city of 250,000 people to almost 500,000 people in 2 weeks, and our school doubled in size. We got 3 more teachers, and I remember thinking it would be both exhilarating and terrifying to be working on trying to sort of come back from that. And so I was Googling, what degree do I need to work in local government? And once I realized it was an MPA, that was the path that I was on. And so I think that journey, to the MPA program at UConn, and then into my, the jobs that brought me to the town manager role in Danvers, and now in Lexington, ethics has been a very central part of my approach to this work. I've been a member of ICMA since I was a graduate student. I joined right away. I had the privilege of serving on the Massachusetts Ethics Committee before joining the ICMA board. And I like the way, Pam put it. Ethics are not punitive; they are education. And when I've spoken on this topic at times, I've described our ethics code as both a compass and a shield. It can help us sort of find the right path when we're unsure what to do. And it protects us when we have, employees or board members or community members who are asking us to do something that, for good reason, is something that is important to them. And you can sort of deflect that and have a conversation with them about the code of ethics and why it matters, and why we need to be grounded in that. And so it's been really rewarding on the CPC to work, especially this year with Pam. We're serving as co-chairs, just to be able to sort of provide that education and have conversations with people. And show people that ethics is not abstract. It's really, it can guide our day-to-day decision-making, and to the point Pam made, that leads to better communities.
A shield and a compass. That's such a great way to lead us into the next question about really what is the ICMA Code of Ethics? How do you best apply it as a leader? And then, Steve, tell us which one's your favorite.
Well, spoiler alert, probably won't be a shock given where I work currently in Lexington or my undergraduate degree in political theory. But tenet one resonates with me, being committed to democratic ideals and representative government. That feels more important now than ever. We celebrated the 250th milestone of the Battle of Lexington last April, and we're gearing up for the 250th celebration for America. And I think it's that tenet to me right now really lands because I'm thinking a lot about, again, I think there's a lot of disillusion in state government and state government and federal government. And we're the folks who always answer the phone. We're the folks who can set the example and try to show that government can still work. We can still deliver services. And so again, as I think about the code and what really jumps for me, it's that first tenet. What are we doing to make sure that democracy functions and people are seeing value in the tax dollars that they entrust us with?
Yeah, I love this question. Thanks, Angelica. So the ICMA Code of Ethics itself, I think, is truly the biggest gift that the ICMA provides to professionals. It's the opportunity to have a shared set of beliefs in how we serve. And it's created by the ICMA membership. So over the course of now over 100 years, ICMA members have periodically weighed in on what tenets of the code of ethics are most crucial to assist us in carrying out our jobs. And being on the committee for professional conduct with Steve, we had the benefit of ourselves getting to wordsmith a couple of the tenets that you see today in the most current version of the ICMA ethics. So I love that it is both foundational, but that it's also a living and breathing resource that does adapt as the world changes. In terms of favorite tenets, shout out to tenet 4, which has always been my beloved favorite tenet. It's serve the best interests of all community members. And what I like about tenet 4 is it is arguably the shortest and simplest of all the tenets, but in my opinion, it is the single most complicated one to try to carry out. It can be really easy to say, do your best and serve everyone. It's much more challenging when you're in a community where what it looks like to serve everyone across a community with diversity, with challenges, a government's asked to do a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And so the art, in my mind, of ethical local government starts with that connection to your community, understanding the needs that your community has, and then figuring out how to balance the limited resources that you have to provide the highest and best solutions for people no matter where they are along kind of their own life journey. And so I think it takes a lifetime to even scratch the surface of how to do that well. And it's why I'm grateful for the professional connections we have to compare notes and always help each other be better.
You mentioned the Committee for Professional Conduct. Can you tell us what that is and why does that structure matter?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So the Committee on Professional Conduct is a cornerstone of the role that the ICMA board plays in supporting our profession overall. And we are a committee that provides a space for essentially peer review of the behavior of public administrators across the globe. And so what we do is my favorite part of the committee is we get to work with our talented ICMA staff who support the ethics program. And we serve as consultants and advisors related to the ethical education and advice that goes out to members to make sure that we're providing the most relevant resources we can. The second part of our job is reviewing individual cases where a public administrator may or may not have behaved ethically in a challenging situation, and we receive stories of what's happening in the profession, and we have the opportunity to provide feedback, advice, and or enforcement of that ethical code to ensure that those who are representing ICMA and those who are representing the local government profession are doing so in a way that best supports all of our communities.
Very well said. You know, ethics is something that's so important. It's something that people really do want to get right. What are some of the common misunderstandings, maybe some of the mistakes, or maybe what are some of the barriers that are out there surrounding ethics in local government to help local government leaders really jump in there and do this in the right way? Steve?
If the work we did was easy, if the decisions we faced were black and white, we wouldn't need a code of ethics. We have a code of ethics because we find ourselves as professional managers all the time in situations where the right answer is not immediately clear. And I think, one misconception is that, well, ethics is just common sense, right? You just do what, everybody kind of understands. And I think it's a lot more than that. It requires reflection and deliberate practice to get it right. I should note Kate Fitzpatrick is one of the mentors I worked with in Massachusetts for many years. She's now retired and working for ICMA. But in March 2020, she and Opal Marlin Jones and Bill Frazier put an article into PM Magazine, and I believe the title was, "What if I want to march?" And in that article, they laid out a really helpful framework of questions that you can ask yourself when you're unsure what the right decision might be. And I think that is an invaluable document for any manager to Google and sort of PDF and download and keep handy, because those questions they include things like, what are the immediate impacts to me personally if I make this decision? What are the immediate impacts to me professionally if I make this decision? What would the code of ethics say about this? What would my employer think about this? Like, what are the things I'm willing to lose my job for? And it's just a framework that helps you sort of compartmentalize these things and start to understand that we operate in a messy environment. It's becoming really, really hard to stay non-political because the world is becoming more and more politicized. So I think gray areas are where, the ethics committee, whether it's the state ethics committee or the ICMA CPC, that's where the value comes from. And I think, some of the barriers we see are folks who might be hesitant or afraid to engage with the ethics committees. That can be a scary proposition if you've not been through it or you don't understand it. The rules can be complex. But one of the things that, I feel very lucky to have worked for the past 12 years in a state in Massachusetts that has a really well organized and well established ethics committee. And the majority of the work they do is fielding questions and having quiet dialogue with members who genuinely want to do the right thing and may not know what that is. And this gives them a resource, a collective wisdom to go to and have these conversations before they make their decision. And it helps ensure stronger decisions, and it helps ensure the trust in our, in the work that we do.
Oh, that's wonderful, because you brought up the idea of how there can be fear. But really, if you have access to education, and there's lots of education out there, there's lots of resources out there. And if you look into those resources, find the right people to plug into that can help you along that journey, reach out to your mentors. I love that you brought up mentorship. All of those things can really take away that barrier of that fear that people might feel. Now, Pam, if you could answer the same question from your perspective.
Happy to. I do want to start by amplifying a piece of Steve's answer that I think is really crucial, which is the art of ethical leadership and ethical behavior is dependent on doing the hard work before you're confronted with the hard choice. And I think Steve illustrated that in a couple of ways. It's truly not supposed to be a retrospective activity. Ethics is about conscientiously building your own self-awareness, what's important to you, to Steve's point, what are those hills that you would stand and plant your flag on and defend at any personal cost, versus what are those things that you need to be much more attuned to your community, your elected body, and so forth, to really guide you in decision making. And so the most important thing I think any professional can do when choosing kind of an ethical career is to just do that hard work and those thought exercises early on in your career. A couple of specific things that I think we've seen, particularly as part of our role in chairing the CPC. Some of these things may be really common for folks, but I think they're always worth reiterating. The first is there's a difference between what is legal and what is ethical. In general, I think we see that mishap pretty often. Well, if our attorney says that this thing is legal, then it should be fine. And we try to really communicate to ICMA members that ethical behavior deals a lot with perceptions It deals a lot with reputations. It deals a lot with, again, that concept of trust in government. And so we will see cases where folks have chosen a path that may in their own life make sense to them, but it does not shine a positive light on government as a whole, or it sets a precedent in a particular community that certain behavior is acceptable when it really shouldn't be. And so I would encourage folks, when they're doing that kind of personal scan of what's important to them, they think about not just what affects your own life and your own career, but what sort of picture does this paint for the general public about what it means to serve in local government? We see a lot of cases, and a huge consideration when we're analyzing a case at the CPC has to do with how does this impact the way the public sees the profession as a whole? We, particularly, I think, in our current times of polarization, we do have to hold ourselves to an incredibly high standard as public servants, and we do have to sort of be above and beyond reproach in the actions that we do. I think the misstep of one leader can often really color people's perception of government as a whole right now, and so we need to be really cautious about that. I think the other piece with ethics that is both challenging and exciting, and again can be misunderstood, is very little when you read through our, whether it's our code of ethics or and the tenets or other resources, it is not easy. We do the best job we can in providing a code of ethics that does serve as that compass, but it's rarely a clear, perfect map, right? It points you in a general direction, but you need to rely on peers, mentors, and supporters to sort of find your way through sticky situations. And then I think the last thing is really this piece that we touched on earlier, that to us, I think at ICMA, the core of ethics is about nurturing and educating and supporting. It is not about penalizing certain behavior. And so it's really, really important to us that we're putting our energy toward lifting up great behavior, lifting up examples where communities have built trust through ethical behavior. I think about some of my own service, and some of my proudest moments as a leader had less to do with having all the answers and had a lot more to do with understanding how important it is to connect with people who are affected by our actions, and understanding their perspective before making a particular decision.
Yes, I'd like to echo the idea that you're not alone in local government, that there are resources, there are people, there are peers, there are mentors, there are colleagues that can help you along the way, that you can consult with, that you can bounce ideas off of. There are resources. So like you said, both of you, when it comes to ethics in local government, get started right away in educating yourself on what those issues are, what those solutions are. And then, like you said, there's gray areas, and that's where other people can really come in and help you get some perspective. I love those ideas. Now, I think that also ties very nicely into our next question. We're going to talk about some modern issues that are impacting the nation today. And a lot of those have to do with things like trust, like polarization is at all-time highs. Technology is moving forward faster than anyone predicted that it would, such as social media. Even AI is changing a lot of things. So Pam, if you want to start, how does ethics address modern issues?
Particularly as we think about our work at the CPC and the types of questions that our members are struggling right now, something that stands out to me first and foremost is how strong our ethical foundation is, frankly. You mentioned a lot of emerging issues that are presenting new challenges to our local governments, but in a lot of ways, those things can be answered for with our existing code and our existing tenets. Regardless of the technological advance, regardless of the severity of disagreements in our community, if we stay centered on people, if we stay centered on listening, if we stay centered on collaborating, if we stay centered on professional respect, that always gets us about 50% of the way we need to go to on any issue. So I want to say, first of all, not being overly daunted by the new challenge in front of you and really being able to look at kind of that foundational support that exists, I think holds very strongly in today's world. For me, in terms of the modern issues you listed, the kind of polarization and also politicization, I think I said that correctly, of certain issues to me is one of the most challenging ideas. So, one of the key tenets in the ICMA Code of Ethics relates to really embracing being nonpartisan and following the lead of your elected officials when speaking on behalf of community. What can be challenging about that for some of us in local government is in our current world, even people's basic identities have been politicized. Even how you show up and move through the world, it's not you necessarily making yourself political. It's other people suggesting in community that standing up for basic foundational ideals like democracy is now somehow overtly political or polarizing. And so, what I have found is a key tool with some of these new challenges is all about how we frame problems as local government and how we talk about the challenges that we're facing and keeping those challenges grounded in those core values of local government, both at the ICMA level, but then also at the community level. So when you take an issue like AI, for example, that's incredibly complex and has layered challenges, both on the individual behavior and usage of tools side of the house, all the way to kind of the large macro impacts of technological advances and the resources that they require from our communities. It's really challenging to unpack that all at once. And so I think keeping centered first and foremost on an issue like that, starting with your own local community, understanding the issue, understanding what misconceptions exist, understanding what data do you have in your organization to be able to navigate through a particular issue. And then sort of expanding from there. What's public sentiment on the issue? What do your elected leaders understand and feel about a particular issue? And I think again, it's that if you stick to that sort of professional playbook of analyzing a problem, learning about it, testing solutions before taking action, I genuinely believe you can work through just about any emerging issue through that way.
So really it comes down to understanding what that emerging issue is, analyzing the impact on your community, and then applying those ethical tenets to it, and then deciding how you're going to move forward from there.
You nailed it.
All right, Steve, what about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Pam just articulated how daunting and overwhelming these threats can feel, um, because the conversations in a lot of localities have become nationalized. But I think one of the advantages that we still have that other levels of government do not have is that, we are attending groundbreakings, we are attending promotional ceremonies for public safety, we are bargaining with our employees, we are doing the water and sewer rate setting hearings at the town office building. So we're still having face-to-face conversations with our citizens on issues that have nothing to do with the political headwinds at the national level, which isn't to say that they aren't landing here and making impacts. But we have these rich daily opportunities to engage with folks and work to build that trust. And I totally agree with what Pam said. In many organizations, your manager might be the only person with a professional ethics code. I mean, again, that is one of the things that sort of separates us as a profession. And so it's easy as the content area experts to forget that not everybody knows what we know. And so it's important to us to sort of weave and embed these ideas into the conversations we're having, talking with employees about merit and fitness, reinforcing to officials, which I know we're going to get to in a minute in the next question. So we have this advantage where we have this hand in hand, in many cases, opportunities to engage with people and build up those micro deposits of trust so that when we need to call on them, they're there.
Yes, absolutely. Now, one of the things, Steve, that is very important in local government is also working with the elected officials. So can you describe how ethics actually helps with working with elected officials, how you can have a healthy working relationship with them, and then how can you use ethics to navigate political issues?
Yeah, this is so sort of thinking back. This is where the shield and compass concept that I keep in my head comes in really handy because um, again, we may be the only folks who know the code, and so we have worked with officials in our careers who come to their seats for a whole bunch of different reasons. Some people are very passionate about a particular topic, and it can be really helpful to be able to put their issue, their context, their passion in the context of reminding them that we serve a really complex constituency with lots of different competing ideas, and sustainability may not be the highest priority for the whole community. It is a high priority for some of the community. And so one of the things I would say, just in terms of working with elected officials, is that um, since I started doing this work 12 years ago, every contract I've ever had, I've insisted on having the code of ethics referenced in my contract as something, something that I expect to be held to. It's a standard I expect to be held to. That gives me something to point to in conversations with board members on topics where it's useful to be able to redirect to that grounding and that foundation. Um, as part of the onboarding process for new board members in the organizations I've worked in, everybody gets a copy of the code of ethics. I keep it hanging on the wall. It's a conversation that we have when we're discussing issues. So because, to the point Pam made, you have to plant these seeds and water them before you find yourself in a difficult situation. And that, when the pressure comes, it's easy to, if you've already documented and been transparent and been true to the process, that you can fall back on that. And I've said to colleagues and folks coming up through you, when you're in these seats, you have however many people you have on your board, you have that many relationships plus one that you're managing. You have a relationship with your board, and then you have a relationship with each member of the board. And you need to build those relationships and understand, what's important to them, what makes them tick. And through that process, you're able to sort of, convey the same back and talk about the grounding in the code of ethics, and talk about, being service minded and making sure that everybody is given equal access to what we do, and given what they need to be successful. And I think the code, again, is just it's a great foundation for that, for any conversation you're going to have.
Do you find that you're teaching your elected officials about the code of ethics, especially maybe if they're a newer council member?
Definitely with newer council members. Yeah, I think it has been an incredibly helpful tool for guiding those conversations.
And Pam, how about you? How do you navigate those situations with ethics?
In the organizations that I serve, making both the code of ethics, but also a little bit of a primer on the council manager form of government and the roles and responsibilities of the elected body vis-a-vis the appointed and administrative body is really crucial. So we certainly take time as new council term starts to make that part of onboarding education. Um, I also think appealing to elected officials' own values in supporting an ethical framework for governing is really important. And so, an example that I might give relates to everyone's favorite topic in local government, snow plowing. We snow plowing is an infamous challenge in local government because um, we don't control the weather. We can only predict it so well, and we only have so many resources to clear streets. And so we've taken an approach in Boulder in particular where we have sort of an equity centered, data driven approach to how we snowplow. Being able to talk about that through an ethical lens with our governing body that also talks through this notion that the resources of the snowplows should go to the streets that have the highest traffic, that provide emergency routes, that provide safe routes to schools. Being able to ground it in conversations about what are we saying yes to using our resources for versus trying to fight every argument around which street isn't getting plowed. This is where falling back on those professional standards and ethics can really support us through those sticky situations where everyone in the community may rightfully and justifiably want some form of service from the government, but when you can't be everything to everyone, how do you then create a structure that is ethically defendable in how you serve your community? So that's sort of the classic example I use. But in order to sort of get to that point, yet again, we'll keep harping on it. You have to have the conversation early so that you're not in the proverbial snowstorm when you're debating the ethical merits of a decision, that you have already put a structure into place that can support that.
Right. It's such a good example of the snowstorm because so many people can envision the drama that can be around something like that. And a lot of people have experienced being in a snowstorm or can imagine if you live in a state that's sunnier and warmer than that. But it's something that in those areas, you know, it's going to come up. So if you prepare ahead of time, you keep ethics at the front and center of your mind and your plans, you'll be able to bring people together in ways that you just can't do without that ethical foundation.
Absolutely. And I have so much respect for the role that our elected officials do play in community in situations like that, where often they are the ones getting the phone calls and the challenging complaints, and their hearts being pulled in many different directions, and they're wanting to be responsive for community. And so we do a disservice to them when we don't sort of equip them in advance to be able to work through things like that with community.
Right. Because honestly, our elected officials, they want to get this right just as much as we do as local government practitioners on the professional side.
Agreed.
All right, so let's help people figure out where to go for resources. How do you get training? Where do you get tools? Where can you get more information for ethical leadership?
Yeah, well, I'd be remiss not to start with ICMA itself. So, the International City County Management Association has incredibly dedicated staff and a program area to support ethical local government. So, I would start by going on the ICMA website, reading and digesting that code of ethics and the associated guidance that we have for how to carry out each of the tenets. I think we've mentioned now Jessica and Camila, our incredible ethics staff at ICMA. They are a phone call away for members to be able to be kind of a first point of contact for ethical challenges. You don't have to be in the complaint process to be able to take advantage of their wisdom. And so we encourage that. I think in addition to the core pieces, there are regular articles, conference presentations, etc., that you can get content. So being engaged in our professional association, I think, is fantastic. You can certainly then go a step out where many states and regional groups around the world have their own associations that draw wisdom from the ICMA Code of Ethics. And so, whether you're engaged at your local level with peers in the profession or you have a membership to the ICMA, I think leveraging that network is really the key place to go.
What other ideas do you have, Steve?
At the state association level, we have a lot of managers in our profession who are not necessarily ICMA members, and that could be for a whole bunch of reasons. It could be in an organization that can't afford the membership, for example, but they probably do belong to their state associations. Not every state has an ethics infrastructure in place through the professional association. So I guess the message I'd be sharing out with folks who may be listening to this conversation in a state that doesn't have an ethics committee, if you have the ability to engage with your state board, talk to them about that. It's incredibly beneficial and helpful. One of the things the mass managers do at their monthly meetings is that the ethics committee will do an ethics minute conversation. They'll pick a tenant, they'll have a quick conversation in front of membership, and it's a little micro. It just sort of reinforces an idea or gets people thinking about something. And I think you've heard both Pam and I talk about, the code works best when you're thinking about it ahead of finding yourself in a gray area. If you've thought about it, then sometimes the decisions do become easier because you already know where that would land within the code. So if you're in an area or you're in a state that doesn't have infrastructure like that, I think that's a conversation well worth starting is to figure that out. And if you're unsure where to go, as Pam said, just call Camilla or Jessica and they will be happy to help you out.
Well, I think that's excellent advice. And in fact, do you have any other advice for local government leaders?
I do. It's as if I knew what the questions were going to be before we had the interview today. So I gave this a little thought. I made mention of the article from March 2020, and just a quick fun story. We had a terrific ICMA fellow in our organization for the past year and a half, who just moved back to Minnesota. Abe Fofana, if you're listening, I hope the job search is going well. And I asked Abe a couple months ago before he left. We were talking about that article, and I asked him, what is the thing you would be willing to get fired for? Like, what would you be willing to lose your job over? And he left the meeting with me and forgot all about it. And like 2 months later, he sent me an email and he said, I've been thinking about the question and here's the answer. And I think that gets to the point about you thinking about these things when you're not in a crisis moment, thinking about the code, thinking about situations you have found yourself in previously. Start thinking before you need it. You build your ethical muscle by using it and thinking about it. I'm a big believer, if you haven't done, I know a lot of people do this, but writing down your journal, thinking about your values, writing those down, thinking about what they are, revisiting them when times get hard. We talked about mentors, but finding your people, surrounding yourself with ethical leaders, be an ethical leader. And I think a really important is slow down. Sometimes I think ethical people can find themselves in ethical hot water if they're trying to make a decision more quickly than they really need to. Oftentimes we think that there's urgency and pressure that doesn't exist. So, slowing down can be your best friend if you're not sure what the right thing to do is. And remember that we serve at the pleasure of the public, and we have to honor that and remember that trust is the most valuable currency we have, and once lost, it's really hard to get it back. So
it's okay to take a beat, to take a deep breath and think about what you're going to do before you proceed, even if you feel stress or pressure. I think that's a really good piece of advice as well. Pam, what advice do you have?
I would again double click and amplify everything that Steve has shared. I think so. To answer the question from my perspective, I'll take a little bit different tack, which is how we show up in our day-to-day lives when we're not in just professional spaces and so forth. And so I like to think of myself as a little bit of a local government ethics evangelist in my in my day-to-day life, in that I think it's important for our communities and those we interact with to hear that within these professions, we have standards like our code of ethics that we embrace. And so whether that's conversation with family or friends, or as we're engaging with the public of the communities we serve, we're having conversations where we call out and converse about events that are happening and whether or not that is representative of what government should be, that we're talking and sort of helping to cultivate our community members to understand what they should and can expect from their government leaders, and what to do when they see or suffer from an unethical decision or direction from their own government, and sort of how to remedy that. Because I think, going full circle back to Tenet 1 and Steve's summary of that, ultimately each one of us who serves this profession is also one puzzle piece in keeping ethical government alive and well in these challenging times. And so I think the more we can do to celebrate when really good ethics happen, celebrate when projects go well, counteract negativity that swirls in the media with shining examples of when our local governments have delivered a much needed service to community, so that we're not just in our own sort of limited realm of ICMA and that network, but we're also ensuring that the world at large is seeing examples of truly great governance.
It's so important to look at that celebration opportunity, because so oftentimes we get really stuck into the negativity and the things that are going wrong that we want to fix. Thank you for that reminder as we're closing out, to remember to celebrate the wins as well.
Absolutely.
Pam and Steve, thank you both for sharing your insights, for the work that you do to support ethical leadership all across this profession. Thank you. Okay, now Jessica and Camilla, I'm going to surprise you two here on the call. And if there's anything else that either of you would like to add, Now's your chance.
I'm Camila Post-Hill Connors, and I'm the ICMA Ethics Senior Program Manager, and I work under the direction of Jessica Cowles, ICMA Ethics Director. Together, we support the ICMA CPC, Committee on Professional Conduct, and manage the ethics program. Really, I'd like to say thank you to these two. They're wonderful co-chairs. And they work not only in service to their peers, but in service to their communities. They are always keeping that at the forefront of every review. And like they said, prioritizing education and those opportunities for the membership. And just a thank you to everybody watching and ICMA members for all of your dedication and service to your communities and your commitment to the ICMA Code of Ethics. So thank you again to these two and to the membership for the work that you all do.
I'm Jessica Cowles, the Ethics Director at ICMA. And thinking about the conversation that unfolded that Steve and Pam participated in and talked about why ethics is so important to them in their career and their service on ICMA's Executive Board's Committee on Professional Conduct, they really provided us with inspiring and humble leadership about why ethics matters, about why being proactive in laying the ethical foundations matters when you come to any kind of crisis situation, whether that's professionally, whether that's personally. Their leadership is so inspiring. And this is the first time we've ever had a conversation with our Committee on Professional Conduct co-chairs as part of March being Ethics Awareness Month. And they're just such wonderful individuals to kick it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you both, Jessica. Thank you, Camila. And thank you, Steve and Pam. All right, now before we close out for the day, if this conversation resonated with you who's watching right now, we would like to invite you to continue this discussion in person at ICMA's Local Government Reimagined Conference, Democracy and the Public Trust. It's taking place May 13th through the 15th in Philadelphia. And this conference brings together public sector professionals to explore how ethical leadership strengthens public trust and how to navigate challenges like polarization, public scrutiny, and high-stakes decision-making. Are either one of you going to this conference in Philadelphia?
I will be there.
So, Steve, why do you think this is a good one to go to?
Well, selfishly, my dad grew up in Philadelphia, so I'm going to eat my weight in hoagies while I'm there. But I just think the topic couldn't be more timely. And I think I'm really excited to go and listen and learn and engage with my colleagues on this topic at a time when I think we're all feeling pressure and challenged. And so what a great opportunity to step back and kind of reassess and reconnect.
I unfortunately have to miss this one, and the FOMO is real.
Pam, why the FOMO?
Well, I can't imagine a better place to have a conversation about public trust and democracy as we're approaching 250 years of the United States of America and going to the birthplace of our Constitution to have that conversation. I think it kind of checks all the magical boxes to create an environment for a fantastic conversation. And the other reason is, in our day-to-day professional world, it can be very challenging to make the time to step away from the next project milestone and the next crisis and really think big picture about why we do what we do. And I think that this conference will afford that opportunity for everyone.
250-year anniversary of the United States. That's a huge milestone. And if you would like to hang out with us and network and connect at the Local Government Reimagined Conference in Philadelphia, the theme again is public trust, democracy. You can learn more about that, and you can register at lgr.icma.org. All right. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.